Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night. Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. It is so good to see all of you here on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. As usual, today is January 17th, 2023. So good to see all of you guys here with me today. Now, the Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms like Anchor, Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, so you can subscribe to me there. I'm also part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can subscribe there, and you can also see me on the Jaybefaunt channel. I'm sorry, the JB Show on Sundays at 1, as well as RBN Live on Tuesdays at 4, and the Sabby and JB Show on Thursdays at 6. If you are new to the channel, please make sure to hit the subscribe button as well as the thumbs up. And thank you to all the patrons on Patreon as well as Coffee. And thank you to all the members and all the people who keep the lights on via various platforms through mutual aid as well. As per usual, I will always get to the comments after my guest, but for the sake of time, I want to make sure that I get to my guest right now. And if you are ready, good to see you. My guest with me today is a very special guest I am honored and privileged to have from the African People Socialist Party, Miss Akile Anai, who is the director of agitation and propaganda with the African People Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement. So good to see you, Miss Akile.
It is so great to be here, JB. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited for this discussion we're going to have today.
Definitely, definitely. Now, for my audience, can you please give us just a quick rundown of what the African People's Socialist Party movement or the organization is, and what the Uhuru movement is, and why it's so important for our communities today?
Yeah, the African People Socialist Party was founded by Chairman Amalia Shatella in 1972. And it was founded with the mission to complete the Black Revolution of the 1960s. And if we take a look at that period in history, where the Black Revolution certainly was something that was gaining momentum here in this country, in the US, and in various places throughout the world, as revolution was the main trend, the US government came in and militarily, ideologically assaulted and destroyed that movement. And the organizations that were, leading the political charge. And so from the ashes of that defeat, Chairman Amalia Shatella and two other organizations based in Florida came together and formed the African People Socialist Party. And our objective, as stated, to complete the Black Revolution and to win and unite African people all throughout the world, to free
Sure.
Africa and African people. And the broader Uhuru movement is under the leadership, it's the various iterations of the African People Socialist Party throughout the world, through different mass organizations, campaigns, and institutions. And it is internationally based. We have, organizational presence in almost every continent on the planet. And so, like the Garvey movement, really working to, be that massive in terms of, the size and level of organization and things like that. So, and carrying out that work that Marcus Garvey started, that the FBI in the 1920s and the US government was a part of crushing as well. So it's that history, that continuum that we continue to pursue. And we won't stop until it's won, until we're free.
Understood. Thank you so very much for that rundown, that synopsis of what it is. I wanted people to know exactly what it is so that they get a really good purview of why this is so important. And as my audience knows quite well, is that a lot of liberation movements, particularly Black or African liberation movements here in the United States, they were targeted by the FBI. Really, the FBI's are just tools of the oligarchs, of the rulers, the capitalistic rulers of this, of really the Western Hemisphere. And so they see any type of movements like this as a threat to their power. And so because of this, we've seen ones who were either in prison, incarcerated, or they were murdered, assassinated by the apparatuses that were constructed really by these movements. For instance, you have, and I'm reading her book on my channel, Miss Asada Shakur. She was also targeted by these same apparatuses. Needless to say, we just had Martin Luther King Day yesterday. He was targeted. Let's remind people that he was targeted by the FBI and also sent a letter to off himself. I got to be very careful with my language, but he was sent a letter threatening him, as well as Fred Hampton was murdered by the Chicago PD and FBI because of him wanting to bring more of a African liberation socialist movement to this country, to really to the West. And so this is one of the reasons why this is such a huge deal. Now, back in July, there was a raid by the FBI. Now, a lot of times this raid actually got eclipsed by the FBI raid on former President Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago, Florida. But about a week and a half before this happened, there was an FBI raid on the Uhuru house here, not too far from me, where you were located in St. Petersburg, Florida, as well as in Missouri. Was it? It was St. Louis, Missouri, correct?
Yes.
So it was in St. Louis, Missouri, as well as in St. Petersburg, Florida, and they really on the false grounds of Russian collusion. Can you expound on that, please?
Yes, and I think what you also said about the this raid on our movement being eclipsed by the one that took place at former U.S. President Trump's home is
Yes.
also really important to note because there is a distinct type of violence and brutality imposed on Black people for
Hmm.
the struggle that we're engaged in. And
True.
so on July 29th, we were woken up by flashbang grenades and assault rifles, drones, armored
Wow.
vehicles in impoverished sectors of these cities. So in Northside St.
Yes.
Louis and in Southside St. Pete, these are historically African communities.
Yeah.
And so this is the type of violence that we were met with. Chairman
Mhm.
Amalia Shatella had lasers pointed at his chest from assault rifles coming out of his home. They were handcuffed, even though they weren't being arrested, handcuffed and told to sit on the curb, which they didn't do. But all of this is the things that are used to intimidate our people and things like that. So this is what happens on July 29th. And as you mentioned,
Mhm.
the explanation that we would receive is because they are issuing an indictment on a man in Russia and saying that this organization is 50-year-old organization. And even more insulting, the 81-year-old chairman Amalia Shatella are pawns of the Russian government, which on the basic level makes an assumption, the insinuation that Black people are too stupid to know that we are oppressed and to organize and chart our own future.
It's
So,
racist.
this is the explanation. And of course, that's not new. The Russia thing, that's not
Yeah.
they targeted, some of the forces you mentioned just now were targeted with the accusation of Russia. W.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson, and countless others, all targeted by the FBI and Russia being used as the cover to make war on Black people, because that's what's happening. War is being made on Black people by the U.S. government, but they can't explicitly say that, so they have to say it's Black people working on behalf of Russia. So we're actually going for Russia. So this is, you said it yourself. It's just bogus, obviously,
Mhm.
but it's very serious what it is that they are attempting to charge us with, and the attack that was made on us is very serious and reminiscent of the attacks made on our movement in the 60s. And Fred Hampton, you mentioned, Chicago, there was a pre-dawn raid, 4 a.m. in the morning. They come in your most vulnerable state, and they did it 5 a.m. in St. Louis and 6 a.m. in St. Petersburg, Florida. And they stole our laptops, they stole our phones, they stole hard drives, like archive materials, all kinds of files and records. They stole that. They still have all of that stuff. Never, turned over our resources. So, this is, what I can say about that day, and just some of the things that I don't want to go too far. So, but yeah.
Of course. Well, of course. And here's the crazy part is that the work that you do in the community, because I want you guys to speak on this, because I want to speak on the importance of what you're doing in the community. Because just recently, and you mentioned this in the press conference that you had at the time, was that you guys were also trying to do practice for doulas, for helping black women to have more safe births, so
Yes.
that, because we all know that the mortality rate for infants, especially black mothers, is a lot higher. I think it's 3 times higher in this country than it is for white women. And so the fact that you want to preserve and help for black women who are, or black persons who are giving birth, then you're actually trying to assist in that. Not to mention feeding people and other different community programs, which I'm part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, and we're trying to build chapters here as well. We're trying to get into that work as well. So it just shows, it's like, what threat, truly, what absolute threat does the Uhuru movement, does the African People Socialist Party pose to the government that makes them look at you and want to do an FBI raid with flashbang grenades and pointing assault rifles at you? It's like, why do they deem you as a threat?
And that I think that question is multi-layered. So I'm gonna try to
Sure.
deal with all of it. Yeah, on the day of the raids, in fact, we were launching our doula training program, and this
Hmm.
is one program as part of an overall initiative called the Black Power Blueprint that we launched in St. Louis, Missouri, in 2017. And that's
Okay.
important because 2014 was the murder of Mike Brown in
Hmm.
Ferguson, Missouri. And we
Sure.
went in following that to start organizing. So we were organizing there for a couple of years, building a political base there in St.
Hmm.
Louis. And in 2017, we were able to pursue the development of the Black Power Blueprint. And so we have a Uhuru House Community Center in St. Louis. We have
Hmm.
a One Africa, One Nation marketplace and a community garden. So we, have a market for Black vendors to come out, sell their goods, and at the same time, we're planting healthy foods and really struggling to put the ability of food production and distribution in our community's hands. It's in the middle of a food desert. So this is what the Uhuru movement has done. Put this institution right there in possession of the African working class there. And then again, as part of the initiative, we were launching a doula training program. On the same day of the attack, we were having, Black women come to the Uhuru House to participate in this program. And this was part of the work that they're trying to stop. With flashbang grenades and things like that, they're trying to push people out of a process like this. And of course, a doula training program is important for the statistics that you just gave. And in St.
Yeah.
Louis, specifically, enough Black babies die a year in St. Louis to fill 15 kindergarten classrooms a year. So a program like this is instrumental in changing that outcome, changing the fate of Black babies, and certainly in St. Louis, and being a blueprint for various other places. So this
Yeah.
dual training program, though, we still kicked it off. They couldn't stop us. So we were able to do that program. But this
Good.
is the type of work that we're doing. And the same is true in St. Petersburg, Florida, where they
Hmm.
block off our Uhuru House Community Center, where inside is a commercial kitchen for Black culinary workers. where
Wow.
also we have a radio station. We operate our newspaper outside of this building. So you have all these institutions, all of these programs that put power in the hands of Black people, political, economic, and social power in the hands of our people. But
Sure.
therein lies the threat. That's the threat. Because when Black
Yeah.
people are able to be self reliant, independent, not having to rely on what it is that our oppressors give us as a sort of don't bite the hand that feeds you type of relationship. When Black people say, we don't want that relationship, we want to be able to do for ourselves, this means now that not only do they lose the ability to control you in the same way, but it also negates their influence in your lives. And the fact is that
Mm.
our oppressors, they live at our expense. Our oppressors did not get everything that they have as a consequence of being thrifty and hardworking. It's a whole
Yeah.
history that has allowed our oppressor to be able to sit on the pedestal that they do now, that they have acquired the social and economic wealth that they have over the rest of us. That relationship's not coincidental. That's historic.
Hmm.
And
Well,
so, go. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna add to your point because it's like you said, don't bite the hand that feeds you. But if it's feeding you crumbs or not feeding you at all, then it's like, why in the world is your hand even there?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
is So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I mean the thing that we get from them to begin with. I mean think about it. 600 years,
Yeah.
stolen labor, stolen resources. That
Sure.
relationship has never ended. Never ended. It's transformed in different ways. But the fact that they throw Black people in prison, at a rate, and how, it's not no secret that prisons are come from a birth of the ending of slavery. So
Sure.
you have this thing where this relationship between exploiting and oppressing Black people for economic gain has never gone away, never. And
Hmm.
so when we can understand that relationship, because the world has been defined to us in a way where our conditions are explained as, well, you're here because of some reason, but that basically makes you less than who the oppressor is. But the fact is, you're there as a consequence of what has been stolen from you, what continues to be stolen from you. And so the
Hmm.
moment you decide that the parasite no longer gets to use me as a host, no longer gets to suck my blood, no longer gets to
Hmm.
take the value of my labor, my genius, and all these things, and I'm going to use it to build my community, that becomes a problem. Because what does a
Hmm.
parasite need? It needs a host. If you take the parasite, if you take the host away from the parasite shrivels up,
Hmm.
and it becomes nothing. So this is what the relationship that has historically been there, it's being ruptured now because Black
Yeah.
people are saying we want to do for self. Not only do we
Yeah.
not want crumbs, we want what belongs to us.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. We want dignity as a people. And so this is what we've been working for, and that's our crime. That's our crime. So
Yeah. Yeah. The crime of wanting to thrive and exist.
yep.
Yeah. One of the things that I was just thinking of as you were explaining this to me and the audience as well is that we have realized that one of the reasons why we're under this oppressive state is because of the economic system that we currently live under. We realized that it was because the exploitation of a people is the reason why they went across the Atlantic to steal a people, bring them here for free labor. That's capitalism. And so, through realizing this, we have divorced ourselves from capitalism and went towards a more egalitarian system. Of course, the word socialism is in the name of the organization you represent. And I think that's one of the biggest threats
Hmm.
to them. And even Fred Hampton said that we won't destroy capitalism with black capitalism, but with socialism.
Hmm.
And it is missed upon many people that most, if not almost all of our black revolutionaries of the past, and by then I'm talking about W.E.B. Du Bois, I'm talking about the Mayor Rustins, I'm talking about the Fannie Lou Hamers, I'm talking about the Angela Davises. They were socialist or communist or Marxist in their ideology, their economic ideology. And before we get to the crux of this interview, the main point of this interview, can you explain why you feel that we have to divorce ourselves from this economic system as well? Because I see it as the perpetuation of white supremacy, the perpetuation of imperialism and colonialism. But if you can give in your words what you feel why we need to divorce ourselves from the capitalistic system as well.
Yeah, I'll start by saying first that the African People's Socialist Party has a distinct worldview, and that it's
Mm-hmm.
defined by a theory called African internationalism, which was
Mm-hmm.
developed by Chairman Amalia Shatella.
Mm-hmm.
And it places African people in the proper place and context of history and in the world.
Okay.
Whereas African people, generally speaking, have been seen as objects of history, something that was, the oppression and colonization of Africa and African people was this
Sure.
necessary stepping stone in history to birth modernity or something like that. And then within that, now we have to struggle to deal with the contradictions that capitalism has created. But capitalism was given birth through colonialism, through the colonization of Africa and enslaving African people, making African people the first commodity for sale. This was the birth of an economic system of capitalism. And it didn't just exist in the US, it was
Mm-hmm.
now a mode of production that locked in the rest of the world. And
Yeah.
Europe and the US became on the forefront, leading the charge of, carrying out this colonial mode of production, locking the world into this economic order where the oppression and the enslavement of African people was absolutely necessary for an
Mm-hmm.
economy to even exist. And so
Yes.
that's the birth of this economic system. And it's not a place where it just exists over here, exists over there. Everybody's competing for the resources that have been generated on the backs of African people and that
Yes.
continue to be generated off the backs of our people. And so, in order for our people, African people, and for the rest of the world, because when we look at what's called capitalism, which we characterize as colonial capitalism, and have gone even further and to say this is a colonial mode of production, that if you look at what that's done to the world and the world's peoples, that majority of the peoples on the planet are suffering as a consequence of that social system. That
Mm-hmm.
majority of and the planet itself, dying as a consequence of the imposition of that social system. But the fact is, what we've characterized as modernity today has defined and shaped the whole world. And
Mm-hmm.
at the center of that world has been the colonizer, white people themselves, has been, right in the center of that world. And so African internationalism places properly African people as the subjects of history, as the cornerstone of this global economic system, and as the fundamental piece that will be a part of overturning this system and creating a whole new world. And this is why one of the slogans we say is the road to socialism is painted black. That you can't have a social,
Mm.
that can't exist. And that any anti-capitalist has to be anti colonialism, has to be anti the colonization and oppression of black people in order to be a
Yeah.
genuine anti-capitalist. So
Yeah.
so we believe the that the correct, to correct society, that the means of production and the value of the labor should be controlled by those who produce it themselves, who produce the value in the society.
True.
That's common sense, for
Well, yeah, it's like duh. Yeah.
so this is what we believe in, that our people cannot know peace, cannot know dignity, and know
Yeah.
true freedom without that. Without that.
True.
So this is why, just to answer your question, why we would say we have to divorce ourselves from this system. And but it doesn't mean that, okay, well, the system can still exist and we just leave from it. it because Black people ourselves are the foundation of that system. So if
Yeah.
Black people decide to divorce it, it's gone. That's
Yeah.
just yeah.
Yeah. We gotta, we gotta get it out of here. But
Mhm.
my thing is that to to do that, it means that we need to purge this system off the earth, because I liken capitalism to a cancer. And whenever you have an oncologist, they say that they have to get rid of every single vestige of that cancer, because even a little bit means it can still fester and grow and then reemerge. So, really, the anti-capitalist movement is a global movement, and excuse me, in order for us to purge this system that takes the means of production and puts the profits and the benefits of it at the hands of a very small few. And what they'll do is they'll put a couple of faces that look similar to ours in there to say or to give it justification,
Mhm.
which is really like a cancer cell making itself look like it has aspects of healthy cells when really it's just as detrimental to our health as any other cancer cell.
Yep.
And so I think that's one of the reasons why your movement is so important. Now, there is indictments coming
Mhm.
that are against you. And the FBI, of course, is listing you and others as co conspirators because they want to come after you. If you can talk about that a little bit, just so that people know the brevity of the situation.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, this is a very serious attack, on our movement, and it can't be
Yeah.
something that is, not regarded as. I mean, we have to. If we saw the violence, if we saw the lengths, the extent that they were willing to go in the '60s, we have to, you know,
Yeah.
associate that with this period. And the fact is that this system is fighting for its life because you look out and there is evidence of crisis abound. And in fact, the attack on our movement is evidence of crisis on on their end. I mean, they're weak and they're in a very weakened place,
True.
in the world, and that's just revealed more and more every day. So this is a statement of their profound weakness and this attack, but it doesn't mean that they won't do everything that's possible to crush this movement, and that's what they're trying to do with
Mhm.
certainly indictments and arrests, charges being made against um, leaders of our organization. And we know for that the what been characterized as the unindicted co-conspirators, which includes myself, that
Mhm.
they are coming after us specifically, but there are others that have also been indicated that they intend to indict as well. And we, in our within our movement, that they intend to indict that weren't listed as co-conspirators. But I want to emphasize, I think, this attack against the chairman, because the chairman is, the leader of this organization. He's been involved in the struggle for Black power for 60 years, majority of his life. I mentioned that he is 81 years old now and still engaged in this fight, and almost 100, close to 100 years old. And that this attack on the chairman as the leader of this organization and as the leader of the African Revolution, that putting him in jail is essentially a death sentence, and that this is another way to carry out an assassination, a legal lynching of Chairman Amalia Shatella. And, so this is something that we have to consider because, they can give you a charge, they can give you multiple counts of that charge,
Mhm.
which I think the charge that we expect the most, I think there's like a minimum of 5 years. So, it's you lock him up 15, 20 years, and you've essentially removed him from the ability to lead this organization and this whole struggle. So
Mhm.
I think that, and of course, the other co-conspirators, myself included, that strategic targets, to place in jail as a part of trying to jail the revolution, trying to jail the struggle that Black people have been engaged in to, for freedom and self determination. So that's what you're looking at, as you mentioned. The indictments can come any day now. They told us early 2023. They even said as early as January. So Any day now, this assault can be made. But the thing that we're saying is that we're not afraid of them. And, the fact is that there's nothing that they can say. There is no way that they can prove the accusations that they've made against us, none whatsoever. And we know that that's not even how, the court systems work. It's not about whether or not you've done anything. It's about whether or not the argument can be convincing. But, they
Mhm.
can't even convince people that this is the case. And we know that because of all the people, including forces like yourself and countless droves of people who are in support of this organization, who don't necessarily share the same political or ideological beliefs, but they can call BS when they see it. And so,
Yes.
that they won't be able to successfully do this, convincingly do this, and that we're mounting a fight back, a defense strategy in the form of the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign. And
Mhm.
our mission is to put the state on trial. They want to put us on trial. We're going to take that opportunity to make this a landmark case, and they're going to have to explain the death of Martin Luther King, the murder of Malcolm X, the murder of Fred Hampton, and in the organizations, the surveillance of Black people. They're going to have to speak to that. They're going to have to speak to the crime of genocide against our people,
Mhm.
and the question of reparations. They're going to have to deal with all of
Mhm.
this. They want to take
Yeah.
us to trial. So, yeah.
Yeah. To add to your point, they're going to have to also answer for the incarceration and murder of George Jackson, the incarceration of Asada Shakur, and the fact that she had to exile herself to Cuba. There's so many different crimes against us that
Yep.
have been done that needs to be answered for. These are international crimes. These are crimes against humanity that have never been answered and we have never received any type of recompense for that needs to be answered as well.
Yes.
And so this is why, and you even ran for office on the campaign of reparations as well, because the Japanese got reparations. The Jews in Germany are still getting reparations. Even slave owners got reparations.
Mm-hmm.
Where's ours?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a question that a lot of people just don't ask themselves because they're not taught to ask themselves that question. And I think part of it is because there this gulf between critical thinking that has been done, especially within our public school system, because who really owns and runs the public school system is not really the people, it's the people who own the politicians, it's the oligarchs and people like that. So I think that is a really great thing to keep in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
One of the authors and co-authors, I should say, of the website 10 Demands for Justice is Nick Cruz. He's my comrade on Revolutionary Blackout Network. This is a website that is talks about defunding the police on the road to abolition. And so I can also recommend that to you if you guys want to give that a read. But that is a great website to talk about the road to abolition because we know that the police themselves are also an occupying military force within this country, really designed to put us back in chattel slavery, even though, by the way, slavery never ended because it's still allowed in the 13th Amendment. This is what I tell my audience all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I can also, submit that to you as well if you guys want to take that, give that a look. But that is also a great resource as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could, I want to speak on the elections,
Sure.
briefly, because this is something that came up in the indictment, and part of what they're using as evidence to charge us of, being agents of Russia, and that they said part of it is that the elections that we ran in
Hmm.
2017 were a part
Hmm.
of some Russian plot, and
Yeah.
it was it was funded and instructed by the Russian government, etc. So this is what they've
Sure.
said. And
Hmm.
again, I've mentioned how we just have to be absolutely insulted by this accusation. But I
It
wanted
is
to,
insulting.
just draw on history too, because Black people in this country, as a means of fighting for freedom and political power, have fought and
Hmm.
died for the right to vote. and have fought and died for the right to access the electoral arena, which doesn't just include voting, but includes running people for office. And the African working class has been able to utilize the electoral arena. This movement. While we have an understanding that freedom is not voted on, but our struggle can be parts of our can be advanced. The demands of our people, like reparations, can be won in the electoral arena and can win masses of people. And this is what we did in 2017. We were covered in Ebony magazine as millennial for change. We put reparations on the ballot for the first time in U.S. history. This happened in St. Petersburg, Florida. We put reparations on the ballot. That was the cornerstone of our campaign. And it
Mm-hmm.
got national coverage. It was, covered by the Breakfast Club at one point. And Barack Obama, the former U.S. president, endorsed our the contending candidate opposing reparations to Black people.
Oh
And
God.
when does that happen? A US president comes into a city election and
A city
endorses
election.
your opponent. So this is a clear statement of an attack against the demand for reparations to Black people. But we had the audacity to do it anyway. And this
Yeah.
is what is being labeled as a threat to US democracy, that this was some Russian plot. And the fact is that, we decided we were going to intervene in the electoral arena. We were not going to leave it dominated by the oppressor and by the forces that, like you said, the force who look like us, but don't speak in our interests at all. And then we call them the petty bourgeoisie, and
Mm-hmm.
who want us, who want to be the bourgeoisie, but uh,
Yeah.
who struggle for that same position. But
Mm-hmm.
so we have these forces who dominate the electoral arena most of the time. But our intervention, was extremely problematic for them. And so this is again something that they're using to assault us. But the same way in which Black people are being targeted right now for just participating in electoral politics is something that's happened to our people historically. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
where we've been faced with white mobs, for trying to go to polling places. I mean, brutalized, beaten, water hosed, church bombs and things like that. I mean, against our people. And Chairman Amalia Shell himself, in part of how he got his start was organizing people in Madison, Florida, to
Mm-hmm.
vote. And he
Mm-hmm.
was a part of that.
And
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
because we're in Florida, the Ocoee massacre that a lot of people didn't know about, all because Black people dared to vote. There was a massacre of Black people that were trying to vote here in Ocoee. Ocoee's what, 15, 20 minutes away from me,
Mhm.
and just a couple of hours, like an hour and a half drive away from you. That literally happened here in Florida.
Yeah. And I mean, so that's it. That's the history of a repression and attacks against Black people for
Mhm.
doing something simple as trying to be able to participate in electoral politics. So this
True.
attack on our movement for and we have to also see it as, a violation of the Voting Rights Act that gave Black people the right to vote. It's
Yes.
this is what they're attacking, our ability to participate in that process. So I just wanted to raise that as well, because it's just really profound, because we again we have to connect this to a history of attacks against our movement, not just some isolated random thing. This is a
Hmm.
whole history that exists and has changed face and form at different times, but it's the same thing. Same thing.
Hmm. What do you say to especially a lot of African peoples here in the United States that have said to themselves, electoralism is dead, I am not for it? What do you say to those? Because there's a lot of people, there's even people who I'm associated with, because I'm either for third parties or I'm for independents, but that's as far as I'll go. Because the Democratic Party and Republican parties are, number one, they're anti-black. Number two, they are pro-capitalist, and they are against workers. So I do not run in that same camp anymore. I have divorced myself from the duopoly. But what do you say to people who are just completely divorced themselves, who said no to electoralism totally?
Mhm.
Do you still have an embrace them and say still organize, or do you say no, give electoralism another shot? What is your thoughts?
Well, I think first of all, I would say I understand. And I think,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in our organizing work, especially around those campaigns, I mean, we were organizing in, our community, African community,
Hmm.
who most oftentimes are not even supposed to participate in elections. And what I mean by that is when elections are happening, you don't even know they're going on because they do not include you or struggle for your participation at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so when we're organizing these communities, even talking about an election, people don't even know elections are even happening, and they didn't know that they were happening until we were involved in the process.
Yeah.
So, we and people were already disenchanted because I mean, for especially for Black people in this country, voting has always, been this thing that it was no guarantee. And I think part of again looking at history, where when Black people did get the right to vote, we have to look at what the situation was. I mean, our whole revolutionary movement, the Black Power movement, and the demand for Black Power was under assault and had effectively
Mhm.
been crushed. So by the time Black people had the right to vote, the Black agenda had been removed and replaced by something else totally. So
Mhm.
we lost the Malcolm X, we lost, the Kings and all of those forces, and they were replaced by other so-called Black leaders,
Oh,
who didn't
yeah.
genuinely represent our interests. So that's part of it. But so we've always had this relationship with the electoral process,
Mhm.
and more it's revealed, especially with the most oftentimes people are told to vote Democrat or vote Republican. These are the the primary things that you're told to do, and
Mhm.
so, but people are disenchanted, disillusioned by it. It's no
Mhm.
secret that these are sectors of the white ruling class for control of the state,
Yeah.
that and that's what it is. And that reality is exposed, I think, even more. So people are more and more they stray away from electoral politics. And so
Mhm.
I would say that the people have every right to feel to lose confidence in that system. And what we have, struggled to do is to use the electoral arena, to our advantage to the extent that's possible. So
Mhm.
one, we should organize. If we're going to use the electoral arena, we should organize, and we should be very, clear about what our objectives are in engaging in electoral politics. And two, that whole voter die mess, that whole, lesser two evils types of, mess that we're constantly confronted with, we have to absolutely demand that anybody who is struck, who says they want to represent us, they have to speak to our interests, and especially Black politicians. That it's not enough to vote for them because they're Black, but they have to be able to support reparations to Black people. They have to
Mhm.
be able to support the demands that uplift our community and speak for us. Speak for us. And,
Mhm.
so not say what they're supposed to say, the status quo or anything like that, but to actually represent us and to run with a platform that speaks to uplifting our community. That's what we have to demand of them. And if there is no politician that will do it, we become them ourselves. We become the
Mhm.
candidate, and our community is the one that organizes and puts forward these forces, so that these forces then are held accountable to the same community
Mhm.
that's organizing for them to win. So there's a way in which we can participate in the electoral arena without totally abandoning it. But again, we do not have to be and should not be satisfied with the options that are presented, before us. And I wouldn't recommend that to anybody, just because that's who they have. So that's who you got to vote. No,
Mhm.
no. And also, electoral politics is not the be all end all, and that's the other aspect of that.
Yeah.
All, organizing happens on different levels, and that's what the Uhuru movement does. I mean, we use electoral politics, but we engaged in political struggle in so many different arenas all the time.
Mhm. Yeah. And this can also be done on the local level. I know me and Savvy talk about you don't have to always look at the national politics. You can also do local. I don't care if it's for dog catcher, it could be for school board, it could be for city council, city controller. I'm not sure exactly how you feel about the Green Party. I do know that they had reparations on their platform for quite some time, but I do see them as a slightly more viable option. They typically are socialist, um, but you have them. You have PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation. You also have Socialist Alternative. These are also groups that are also, for the liberation of people, but they're not specifically African. But there could be coalitions with them. I'll put it that way. Um, but just like you said, and I think there's a phrase that says all politics is local. And so because of that, then you use that as a vehicle. And like for instance, you all have a community garden, things like that. And you can use that as part of the apparatus to build up the community and say, look, I may be running, but also here's a look at the community garden. And if you guys want to, we can actually repeat that in different parts and sectors in the city so that everybody can have more healthy food. Also, there's an inflation. Well, inflation I like to call, price gouging going on internet, national, well, internationally, yes. So if you guys want to save some money, let's do that. Hey, y'all got some chickens? Let's start making some eggs because I ain't paying no 9.99 for no eggs. So, you guys can do that. There's so many different things, and it's building. What a friend of mine, Kamali Rose, he said, building dual power, right? And I think that's what you guys are trying to do. I think that's one of the reasons why you're considered to be so dangerous, right?
Yeah, I mean, our the chairman's actually put forward the concept of dual and contending power. So, you have,
Oh,
yeah, so you have this situation. We talked about this earlier in terms of negating the influence of the colonizer, negating the influence of the oppressor in your community and over your affairs. And so,
yeah.
not only are you and the way in which you contend is by actually putting in place the institutions and the practices of of something else totally that again
Hmm.
removes their influence in your community. So you don't have to rely on them to do something. You don't need a politician to come and say, okay, fine, we'll allocate resources to so and so. We're just going to do it ourselves. And we come
Hmm.
together as a community, organize that and that process and then put it down on the ground. And that and yeah, as we said, is dangerous because not only do Black people now don't need this social system for anything, but it runs into a limitation, not the dual and contending power, but the system itself, which exploits Black people. It runs into a limitation because it's not able to do that anymore in the same old way. That creates the crisis within the economy when it's not able to rely on and suck the blood of your people and exploit you. This is the thing that creates the shambles. That's why there is war in all these various other places for their resources. And when those same colonized people who are refusing, colonialism, who are refusing U.S. imperialism, fight back, there's a crisis. There's a spike in oil costs. There's, all of these things are located in a struggle where the host refuses to be that anymore for the parasite. So this becomes a serious problem for a dominating economic system that requires the exploitation and oppression of the people. So
Hmm.
you put power, political, economic power in the colonized hands. Then again, like I said, you run into a real serious issue. So yeah, but dual and contending power is extremely critical, and it's how we get to the point of totally eliminating the system itself altogether. So
Hmm. Yeah.
that's the path.
Cool. Yeah. And in the last few minutes, while I still have you here, I want to focus on what others can do,
Mm.
what our viewers can do, not just monetarily, but also they can do themselves within their own community. Of course, if you guys wish, you can join the African People Socialist Party. I hear they're great, so do that. But I had this up for a little while, but I also want to put it back up again. This is the link to also donate to the Uhuru movement. This is for the legal costs for you guys so that you guys have proper and adequate legal representation. Excuse me, because this is also deeply important. I'm also going to put the link into the chat as well because that's important. Um, but what can people do, not just monetarily, but even just materially and rhetorically? What can they do in order to assist the African People's Socialist Party, especially people who may be outside of it?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would say to definitely join the Hands Off Uhuru Defense Campaign, the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign. And there are multiple ways in which you can be part of this campaign, the ways in which you can be a part of the defense. And part of what we're doing now is this discussion that we're having, because they part of what they want to do is to sweep this under the rug. As you said, a raid a week later happened, and it took this out of the media cycle. So this was no longer the thing that dominated, even though this threat weighs heavily, over the lives of people and over this movement. So we
Mm-hmm.
can't let that happen. We have to blast this out everywhere as far and wide as possible. So platforms such as yours and others, who have, platforms who can extend them, and just to share the content, the information of this campaign is part of that fight back. You can organize a Hands Off Rude Defense Committee in your community. You can, pull together and win other forces to go out and distribute literature, put up posters, and organize local events and forums and things of that nature to bring more awareness of this campaign, but to also win more people to be part of it. This is an international campaign, so everywhere you're located, you can be part of this and organize a committee. We have the website handsoffuhuru.org, which features all of the outreach materials to take out into your community. It has different information like our events calendar. Yesterday actually did a national MLK Day of actions. So there were actions that happened, all throughout this country, and various people had up their posters, Hands Off Uhuru, and they put their city there. So this is again just the extent of the movement and where people are organizing and things like that. So that's stuff that you can do, and you can also take the emergency response pledge. So when indictments do come down, you are the first to know that indictments have come, and this is what you need to do. This is how you need to jump into action, this demonstration, etc. So all the information is available up on our handsoffuhuru.org website. We have an event coming up the 21st, January 21st, called Build the Anti-Colonial Defense, where we'll have Chairman Amali Shatella, Ward Churchill, and others from the various anti-colonial struggle and fronts will be participating in this event. So highly encourage people to come to that as well. But yeah, there's really no limit to what people can do. Resources, of course, over I think $150,000 are needed to mount the legal defense itself. And so there's definitely lots of resources to be raised. But again, anything that you can contribute to this whole campaign, your skills, your time, volunteering, things like that, we're calling on you because this is your movement. This is your struggle. And the attack on us, we've heard people say, is an attack on all Black people, certainly, and an attack on the supposed rights that Black people have of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of association. These things, this is an attack on all of that. So if people can recognize that and unite that this is something that cannot happen, and Chairman Amali Shatella cannot step foot in prison, then we ask you to come on board with this campaign in whatever way you can. So,
Hmm. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that very much. And, just to the last couple minutes while I still have you here, um, what lasting words do you want for people to know and understand about this movement, as well as any parting words for our audience as well?
yes. Well, first, I want to just really appreciate again you for extending your platform to us. I mean, it really is an honor to, be on this platform, but also to see the support, the overwhelming support, and just the fact that what they anticipated, which was to isolate our movement from the people, especially by saying that they are Russian agents and the big bad Russia, be scared of Russia, that they attempted to make people afraid of us. And what we've seen is the exact opposite: people running towards, this movement to defend it, and to push back against state repression. So I just want to appreciate you and your stance, and the stance of your audience, and all of you for participating in this discussion. And just in closing, I would say, one, go to handsoffuhuru.org for all information regarding this campaign. And that this is a really profound moment in history. The world is changing, and I'm sure everybody is seeing that, is able to see that. But for those who aren't very clear on what's happening, the world is changing, and the old system that we've experienced, what we've characterized as colonial capitalism, is dying away, and it's fighting for its life. And that's what an attack on our movement represents: is a fight for its life. But the fact is, even as it fights, even as violent as it can get, that it cannot survive. And the peoples around the world, and history demands it, that a new world be ushered in. And that's what we're in the process of creating. And so we cannot retreat. We will not relent, that this is just the beginning. And we should be very confident after this attack that we can be and will be victorious, because they don't attack somebody that's not a threat. That's not winning. You know what they say? You ain't doing something right if you don't got a couple haters. This is what we look at, on a much, bigger scale. This is what we're looking at, because we're doing something right. We're on the right side of this question, on the right
Yeah.
side of history. And, that's what we have to have total conviction in, as we go up against this machine. But again, a rusted machine that don't got the same fight in it that it had, even a decade ago. So we are winning. And again, hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa, and hands off Chairman Amalia Shatella. And there was a saying in the 60s, when Huey P. Newton was being locked up, free Huey Newton, or the sky is the limit. And I think I can get away with that on YouTube. So, hands off Uhuru, or the sky is the limit. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miss Akile Anai, at the African People Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement. I appreciate you so very much, and I can't wait to have you back on. And I would also love to have you on RBN, Revolutionary Black Network, to also talk about what's going on further as well.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye. you know, it's interviews like that where it sparks within you a sense of outrage as to how our government treats people who are the most disenfranchised among us. And the mere fact that this movement is doing so many good things for the community, and yet they're seen as a threat. A hit dog will holler, right? They're scared. They are they are frightened right now because they're seeing that, especially with a lot of us that are of the younger generations, they're seeing a lot of us that are now going, this system doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. For a lot of us, it hasn't worked for our parents. It's not going to work for our kids. So why are we still clinging to this system? And they'll drag out some of the capitalists and say, hey, take a look. This person looks just like you. They're millionaires, they're billionaires. But the crazy part about it is they're the exception, not the rule. And so when you talk about a liberation for all of us, And this extends outward to everybody, right? That's a threat to power because they won't stop until they own everything. That's the system. This is what we're fighting against. I had on Miss Akile Anai. One, because this story doesn't get enough coverage. You're not really going to hear this that much on corporate news. Or if you do, they're going to try to paint a narrative that they are Russian colluders. When in reality, we are just a people that are looking to live a life of dignity and to thrive. But apparently, within the imperial core, that's a crime. Hmm. It's a crime to thrive. It's a crime to have an egalitarian society where the most disenfranchised people are no longer disenfranchised. It's interesting, isn't it? To the oppressed, equality feels like oppression. I repeat myself. To the privileged, I should say, equality feels like oppression. The billionaires feel like if you take their capacity from being billionaires away, that's a crime against them. When really, them being billionaires is the crime. It is the crime. The fact that we have a white supremacist structure is a crime. The fact that we have any supremacist structure is a crime. Ay, ay, ay. Thanks, JM, for this super chat. Appreciate it. So good to see you. JM's also a JB member. Mr. Fly, who is also a JB member, says, "Hello, JB. I need to connect with you on a personal level on SSDI, mental and newly physical. Can you tell me how to DM you? I have a problem." You can go to my email. Um, put my email in the chat, and you can email me. There you go. But yeah, and that's part of the system. It has subjected us to, and has continued to subject us to. And one of the reasons why so many young people are now turning away from capitalism, the reason why a lot of young people are turning away from capitalism now is because it hasn't worked for them, and we see the damage that it does. It's like it's like jumping on somebody's back when you were very little. You got grandpa, and you're 3 years old, and you jump on his back, and you hear him go, "Oh ho ho ho!" Right? But then you keep doing it, and he still keeps on making that sound. Oh ho ho ho! You jump on his back because you think it's fun, and you don't know any better until you realize you're hurting grandpa, and Been hurting grandpa the entire time. Now that you know you're hurting grandpa, are you going to stop? Yeah, you may not be able to jump on him, right? But you still have grandpa around. You won't break his back. That's like having keeping capitalism around. Some of you have had it good and you kept jumping on the disenfranchised over and over your entire life, thinking that everything's fine until you realize the damage you've been doing, the damage that the oligarchs have been doing, the damage that white supremacy has been doing. Now that you know it's been hurting us, do you have the compassion? Do you have the empathy to stop? To say, you know what? We don't need this system anymore. The system's not working for all of us. We need a system that's more equal, more equitable, more egalitarian. Let's stop this system. Or are you going to blame the people for having the bad back? Because you've been jumping on it for years. Are you going to blame them? Like Dr. King said, capitalism has worn out its usefulness. It was useful for a select few. But now, as our liberation grows, it's no longer useful for the masses of people. This is why the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement are so important. So, yeah, let's go to the chat. Check your email, December 26th. Okay, I'll check it. Make sure to check that. John Chaos says, why are young people turning away from cancer? Boom. Why are they turning away from it? Brent Hudgens says, my parents always ask why so many young people are so angry. And I asked a rhetorical question, what do they have to be happy about? Great response. Answer a question with the question. Yeah, even Miss Alita is co-signing. Hey, it's good to see you, Miss Alita. Upstate Raider says, according to multiple reports and sources close to Tom's hardware, Intel and Microsoft have quietly resumed operations and a basic level of support in Russia. Interesting. Thank you. Brent Hudgens, I love my parents, but they can't list one thing really. After all, they spend a lot of time in support of the duopoly polarization. I think that's one of the problems with the older generation is a lot of them are propagandized. But somebody said this in a TikTok, and it just it's a light bulb moment for me. The reason why a lot of boomers there's such a divide between a lot of boomers and a lot of millennials, especially the millennials and Gen Z, is because a lot of the boomers that were based were killed. They were oppressed and killed so that they never got to be boomers that are in their 70s and 80 years old. They never got to live long enough. Our revolutionaries that are black, a lot of them are either still in prison or they are dead. They never got to make it to boomer status. They're gone. They were wiped from existence. So who's left? So this is why there's a huge gulf, because you have a portion of people who stayed with the status quo that kept on living while some of their generation got whacked off. Well, I'm sorry, that's the wrong way to say it. They got erased. And so now they fell off, and the people who still kept the status quo, they kept on living. Fred Hampton's not that wasn't that much older than my mother. Fred Hampton would be 74, maybe 75 now. Fred Hampton is old enough to be my father. He could have been my father. But they're gone. I'm going to say something that's going to make some people a little bit scared. But don't be surprised if it happens to many of us millennials. But that fight continues because we know that capitalism's on its way out. We know that it's on its death knell. There are some of us that are still around that are boomers, but there's not enough. This is why we have to make the amount of us so great, so populous among our younger generations that there's nothing that they can do. And the next massive population that's going to reach the more massive voting age will be millennials. Gen X, for some reason, I feel like Gen X isn't that big of a population. They're a significant population, but I feel like millennials are just a little bit bigger of a population. But yeah, that was a tough thing to talk about, but it's true. Sulamoon says, I'm just glad that my former Republican boomer hubby has seen the light. He's a socialist now. Congratulations. Congratulations on him seeing the light. Kat Terrell says, was just listening, but JB, you should do an entire show on this truth. Maybe. We'll see. Brent Hudgens says, very true, JB, and many boomers elected to collect things, and millennials seem to gravitate to experience, which is a fairly distinct difference in priorities while alive. Thank you so much. Mr. Fly says King, so Martin Luther King Jr. would still be alive too. Yeah. Raziel said capitalism is in the ICU. Well, we need to get him out of the ICU and just pull the plug. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to kick the plug out of the wall, and you got some people holding us back, like, stop it. We're like, no, it has to die. It has abused people long enough. Gen X me was too small to overpower boomers. Yeah, we have to let time take care of it. Sweary Fairy says, I can't even get my mother to accept that food shortages are inevitable. Drives me completely nuts. It's happening now. It's happening now. Oh goodness. Lucretia Williams, love your work, JB. Oh, thank you. I'm always happy when you tune in. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That means a lot actually. I know what you mean. Thank you so much. Let me go to Rockfin. Let me hang on. I'll go back to Rockfin in a second because Rockfin freezes sometimes and it annoys me. Now, the young lady that we had on, Miss Akile Anai, I want to share with you guys one of the reasons why I was so excited to have her on while I have a couple minutes left. She was at a press conference and oh man, she was spitting facts here. So let's go.
I think that this exposes the crisis that U.S. imperialism is in, because the U.S. and other world colonial powers have been collaborating against Russia for early into the early 1900s, and this is a consequence right now in 2022 that we see the same attack against Russia. And right now, this war with Ukraine, this defensive war in Ukraine that Russia is actually waging against world colonial powers, not Ukraine as a single entity, but the U.S. and all colonial powers who have an interest in colonially dominating African people right here in this country and around the world and extracting resources from the majority of peoples on the planet. That system, this current system, is in severe crisis, and they cannot rule in the same old way.
By the way, I think this may end up getting demonetized because any mention of the country that starts with a U and rhymes propane, the tube doesn't like that. But hey, unfortunately, I may get demonetized. But that's the way it is. Because, well, she's speaking facts. Anyway, let's continue.
So that's what we understand, one, about the government. And the ruling class itself states that imperialism is on the decline. U.S. power is not, it's not cyclical, but it is permanent. So that's number one. Number two, the African People Socialist Party is an organization that has been here for 50 years. It is an international organization that not organizes just here in St. Petersburg, Florida, but right there in St. Louis, Missouri, in Oakland, California, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and all throughout the US, in Africa, in Europe. And the history of the African People Socialist Party is to unite with any forces that unite with the anti-colonial struggle. And we feel that is a just struggle. We feel that every colonized African who was gunned down in the city of St. Peter, anywhere else in this country, like George Floyd or like Mike Brown, we feel that our response is to fight against that relationship. Our responsibility is to fight against our oppression and our domination. And that means organizing a revolutionary capacity to make that possible. And that means that we unite with any force, because we understand that colonialism is a global system and that it has interests everywhere throughout the world.
Y'all, I'm gonna tell you, this is why I had her on.
It struggles for true democracy. This is what it does to the people. So, no, I did not enter this work being afraid or thinking that this was a bad decision. I follow the leadership of Chairman Amalia Shatella and African internationalism, and it does not steer me wrong.
So there's never a concern that again, working with a.
It doesn't matter what we. It doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter what we do.
And you're not willing to say that you did not take money.
I'm not willing to say anything without my lawyer present. I'm not willing to say anything without my lawyer present. I will not confirm that for you. No, he was not arrested. He was put in handcuffs as well as our deputy chair owner, Zanea Shatella.
There's a gentleman that kept there was a gentleman that kept questioning and trying to paint this narrative that there was a collusion with Russia. That there was, oh, you guys, why don't you denounce Russia? And it's like, what? Number one, we're willing to work with anybody that is anti-colonial. Like, what part of that don't you understand? If they're fighting against the colonizer, then I guess we have to, combine powers with them. Okay, fine. If it's just like with Cuba, if they're fighting against the colonial powers, or if it was Venezuela, or if it was DPRK, you know, they killed Thomas Sankara, they killed Muammar Gaddafi. Why? Because they were fighting against colonial power. Because colonial power considers anyone that resists them to be a terrorist, even though they're the ones going to them to extract their resources and terrorize them. Terrorists, let me put this down. Terrorists consider freedom fighters to be terrorists. Terrorists consider freedom fighters to be terrorists. It's this weird psychosis. Because they feel that they should be able to determine the fate of other people beyond their consent. I know what you need better than what you know that you need. And people wonder why we got rape culture in this country. Consent. What's that? That's what the United States says. They also never authored the 1994 crime bill. They also never put or let's just say our ancestors in chains. I mean, they never mass incarcerated us. They weren't kneeling on the neck of George Floyd. China and Russia never were they the ones that killed people like Emmett Till? What about Breonna Taylor? Was that Russia? Did they imprison Assata Shakur under false pretenses? What about George Jackson? Did Russia do that? What about our schools? Did Russia underfund our schools? It's weird. Let me go here real quick because people just do not read. By the way, I said this, and I'll say this on RBN. I'm gonna say it with my whole chest. If you hate socialists, you have something in common with Nazis. If you hate socialists, you have something in common with Nazis. That's you. Anyway, let me show this tweet thread really quick. Let me see. Where is it? Oh wait. No, that's not where it was. Okay, I found it. All right. That little musical number. Now, let me share my screen really quick. Share the screen. Share the screen. All right. So I put out a tweet. I said, "Is it safe to say that NATO was a horrible idea?" The NAFO accounts, they were triggered. Oh dear God, they were triggered. They're calling me an idiot. They're saying that my daddy should have pulled out. They're saying all types of stuff. They're like, "Yo, you are horrible," and I'm just like, like, what was really the point of NATO? Wasn't it? Hang on. Let me ask you this question. Wasn't it the communists that defeated the Nazis? If they were the ones that defeated the fascists and we're against fascism, then why are we trying to take out the commies? Why are we trying to take out the Soviets if they're the ones that defeated the fascists? If they're the ones that defeated the enemies of the people, the ones that were trying to take us out, then how are they our enemy? Doesn't make sense. Hmm? Lord and Lord. Some people just don't read. Of course, I had to advertise the stream because, well, you know, Akile Anai was based. I also said I find it funny that people who have Ukraine flags in their flags in their bio don't have a Yemeni or Palestinian flags in their bio. And I said, man, Elon Musk must really need to take care of these novel trolls. And so, yeah, they're willing to back up a country that has Nazis in it that are blonde hair, blue eyed, but when it comes to people fighting for their liberation in the Gaza Strip, they have nothing to say. They have nothing to talk about. They have the IDF literally, committing genocide against them and their country, and they have nothing to say. You literally have Saudi Arabia committing a genocide against the people in Yemen and bombing people with the bombs that are literally created and manufactured here in the United States, and our government's literally selling it to them, committing atrocities against people in Yemen, and they have nothing to say about that. The atrocities that are happening in Somalia, they have nothing to say about that. Interesting. What about the atrocities that are happening in the Congo? The crimes they did in Burkina Faso? No, they ain't got nothing to say about that. What about the atrocities that they're committing in Haiti? Nothing to say about that. No, 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 no. Dare they say anything about that? This is why education is so important. That's why we got to talk about these things. This is why black people, especially black people, need to start reading up on foreign policy, because this tells you the trends of what your oppressor is doing. Study your oppressor. I'm talking to everybody, but especially my people. Study your oppressor, and don't just go by the accounts of what the oppressor says or their corporate media. Go to outside sources. Go to the sources where people mock. Hell, RT is a great place to start. You can look at people like Danny Haifong. You can look at people like Margaret Kimberly, Richie Medhurst. You can go to Fiorella Isabel and Craig Jardu Pasta. Sorry, I forgot how to pronounce his last name. You can go to a lot of these different resources. You can go to Aaron Mate and Max Blumenthal. You can go to so many people who are outside of the imperial core, and they're stenographers. Study your oppressor, know who they are, and see what they're doing against other victims of colonization, other victims of imperialism, other victims of capitalism. And then build people up and let them know what's going on. And let them know that they have power. And that's the reason why they want to get rid of the African People Socialist Party. So I got to get going. But thank you so much to Akile Anai. Also, let me share just one more time where you can donate to their defense fund. So it's opencollective.com/hands off Uhuru. Right? I'm gonna put this in the chat really quick so you guys can contribute there as well. And here is their page. Actually, let me put this banner up as well, just so that people can see it on the rewatch. There you go. Because organizations like this are very, extremely important. And you have different types of donations, right? So, just do what you can. All right? Thank you so very much to everyone that has contributed to them. Thank you so very much to anybody that has contributed to me, including super chats anybody that's contributed to me various platforms for mutual aid. And thank you to all the patrons on Patreon as well as Coffee. For without you guys, I would not be able to do this. Of course, I will be getting into the further reading of Asada Shakur's autobiography, as well as Dirty Truths by Michael Parenti. We'll be getting into that. I know I've been slacking a little bit, but I got to get back on those because those are also very important, because reading theory as well as the books from revolutionaries is also very deeply important to this channel. And be sure to catch RBN Live. It's going to be a good one. We have a lot to talk about. And, Evelyn says, if you tremble with indignation at every injustice, then you are a comrade of mine. Dr. Ernesto Che Guevara. Yes. Did you guys know that Che Guevara was actually a doctor? Education is elevation, people. Anywho, I just want to thank all of you for tuning in. You guys are wonderful. Look, water your plants, water yourselves. Leave the world better than you found it. And by the way, the word Uhuru is Swahili for freedom and independence. Never forget that. And oh yeah, mwah. Forehead kisses, hands off Uhuru. Love you.